we went, I think it was like Mickey Nielsen and Taz, and we went surfing Rincon. Because I'll never forget, like we're up surfing Rincon. I think Taz got in a fight. He beat some guy up at Rincon, broke my board over the guy's face, and Michael Ho was laughing, just going, dude, we told you that guy's crazy. Taz, that guy's a nut, you know. And I was like, oh my gosh. And we're driving the Quiksilver van down, and it was seriously like Spicoli. You know, just joints, beers, like smoke coming out. We're all salty, dirty, been surfing Rincon all day. And I'm like, oh, you guys, we got to stop in LA on the way to Noops. Like, what? They're like, dude, what for? And I'm like, will there be food there? You know, it's just like, yeah, there'll be really good food, man. There'll probably be champagne and stuff. It's this it'll be this full Hollywood party with like, you know, rock stars and movie stars. They're like, who cares? Like surfers don't care about that stuff. They're like, just food, dude. Is there going to be food? We're all stoned, you know?
Are you ready, boys? Start swimming.
That's Danny Kwock. I'm Jamie Brisick. This is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Costa Sunglasses, FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, the Journal delivers 136 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more and to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. Born in Hawaii in 1961, Danny Kwock rode his first waves at Waikiki. Surfing took a brief hiatus when he moved with his family to the San Fernando Valley, but picked up soon thereafter when they moved to Newport Beach, right at the Wedge, which is where Danny first made his mark, charging big waves. He became one of the brightest, flashiest surfers of the Echo Beach scene. This coincided with the rise of punk and new wave, and Danny was in the thick of it, wearing pink board shorts and riding polka dot twin fins when most Californians followed a far more understated ethos. Danny was on the cover of Surfer magazine in 1980, did a short stint on the World Pro Tour, but soon became a forerunner to what we now know of as a professional free surfer, which sounds like an oxymoron, but may be one of the greatest hustles in surfing. But Danny also saw the virtues of the long game. When the opportunity arose to work in a behind-the-scenes role at Quiksilver, he jumped at it, and he hit his straps as the marketing director, a position he held from the early 1980s up until the mid-aughts. It should be noted that Danny's relationship with Quiksilver began a few years earlier, when he and his Echo Beach buddy Preston Murray got caught stealing board shorts from the warehouse. Danny's early team captain marketing position started in what were wild, druggy days. The industry grew fast, and Danny played an instrument role in that growth. I first met him in 1981 when I got sponsored by Quiksilver. He poured a lot into us team riders, and a lot into the brand. He had one foot in our world, which is to say the blinkered, narcissistic competitor, and the other in the publicly traded juggernaut that was Quiksilver. He was a double agent of sorts. Feathers in his cap include developing the Quiksilver in memory of Eddie Aikau, today known as the Eddie, signing Kelly Slater, and working closely with Lisa Anderson. Danny and I spoke at his lovely Montecito home, where the backyard swimming pool twinkled and the state-of-the-art espresso machine made strange noises. Danny Kwock, welcome to the show.
Right on, Jamie.
We go way back, but you go back even further, and I know that you have a story of being in Waikiki and meeting Duke Kahanamoku.
Yeah. You know, I was born in 1961 in Hawaii, and my grandmother, oddly enough, she was from Okinawa, and she was like a princess from there, and she became like a servant when she fled. Their family had to flee Okinawa when the Japanese took over and all that way back in the 1800s, that back then. But anyway, she worked for Doris Duke, the wealthiest woman in the world at the time. And I think at that time, Doris would have been like 50. Duke was probably about 70. But Doris had a big, huge estate in Diamond Head my grandma worked at that was called Shangri-La. I think they've done tours there and stuff for tourists and stuff now, or I don't know if they're doing them anymore. But my mom would go and take us to visit my grandma, and I was like 3 years old, so this would have been like 64-ish or somewhere in there. And I remember being there, swimming in the pool, and, you know, there weren't many people there, but this one time I was there, and this adult was there, this large, big man, gray hair, super dark, and he was with Mrs. Duke and their family at the house. And he, you know, I was playing in the pool, little Grom. So little local kid playing in the swimming pool, jumping around in the water, you know, and this man puts his hand on my head, you know, like just pets me like a little kid, like, you know, he's super tall and super tiny. And I look up at him, and I'll never forget. I thought from watching like cartoons and stuff, I just thought, dude, that guy must be the king of where we live, of this island that we live on, Hawaii. And I didn't know it was Duke Hanamoku. I was just like, that guy looks like a king. He had gray hair, dark skin, his posture. He was bigger than life. He was so tall to me as a little 3-year-old. It was really wild because then, like, I don't know, 5 years later or something like that, I was like 8 or 9, and that's when Duke died. And it was in the newspapers. It was a huge deal in Hawaii, on the island. Like, everybody knew. He was like, seriously, king of Hawaii. And then my mom and dad were like, that's the king of surfing, you know, that's the godfather of surfing, the guy that brought surfing to the world. And I was like, I was just tripping, you know, like, whoa, that was the guy that put his hand on my head, that king that I thought he was a king. It's the same guy. Yeah. And my parents never even spoke. It wasn't even like it was just like, whoa, he's just like a sad day for Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And I remember another thing that was, as a kid growing up in Cocoa Head right there, these are the things that my earliest thoughts of surfing was. My neighbor right across the street had a surfboard, you know, on his lawn, an old balsa, like longboard surfboard on his lawn. And I just knew him as Uncle Mac. But turns out later on in life, you know, I didn't even know until way later, until like guys like Dave Palmer told me about stuff like this, because Dave was such a historian and he was my best friend. And when I moved to California, but it was Clarence Mackey, the famous, iconic surf photographer that took pictures of Duke. Mm-hmm. And he took pictures of, like, you know, all the greats back then, Tom Blake and Rabbit Kikai, and all the way up through like the Jerry Lopez era, you know, when they were kids, because I had a conversation with Jerry and about Clarence Mackey, and he's like, yeah, Mac, he was the man, you know. So that was kind of wild that, you know, that was my first take on surfing, like seeing a surfboard, kind of the Duke thing, and then, you know, and then venturing out to go surf. I think my first time I caught a wave was at Waikiki on a longboard. I was like 10 years old, because right after that I was curious. That was like I was 8 or 9, and then like when I was 10 I was like double digits. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to catch a wave. And my mom, and then it turned out, I didn't even know, my mom never used to talk to me about it, but she used to hang out with the Beach Boys down at Waikiki and ride redwood boards. And then she started telling me stories about how they couldn't carry the boards to the beach. She had the big dudes had to carry the boards down for the ladies to ride them because they couldn't carry them. And they used to drag their feet and all this stuff. And my mom was a big swimmer. They used to swim in the Duke Natatorium. So, because she wanted to be an Olympic swimmer. And so all these things were like, whoa, I should be in the ocean, you know, this is where we live. And so, you know, I was playing Little League and all those sports. So learned how to catch waves at Waikiki, and then kind of like took a back seat after longboarding, because I was like, yeah, that's all right. But it wasn't like until I stumbled on a shortboard at my friend's house, and his brother had a shaping room, and this guy, Marshall Crum, a dear friend of mine who actually designed the Eddie logo. Mm-hmm. And he makes my boards to this day now, but ripping surfer, that an amazing human. He had this like little knee board type board that was someone had given him or something. It was up at the house, and we went to Waimanalo to Bellows down there because it was sand bottom, and the board was a knee board, so it was like 5 foot, and I was so tiny. I was mini Grom. So we go down there to that area, Waimanalo Bellows, and I catch a wave on that board. And I'll never forget, because I was like, actually, I had a concave deck, and I was in it, you know, and I could feel it. And I'm just like, whoa, that feel of wiggling. I probably thought I was doing cutbacks and I was probably just going straight, but at least I wasn't going in the whitewash straight. I was going parallel with the waves like I would see the good guys doing it, the older people. And I was like, whoa, I'm a surfer, you know, and that's when I was like, I wanted to be a surfer. And that was around 11. And then, you know, 11, 12, it's like, we leave Hawaii. And I'm like, wait a second, I want to be a surfer and I live in Hawaii. Now we're moving to California to the valley. And I'm like, there's no waves here. There's just smog.
Yeah. And where were you living? Where did you move to in California?
I moved to Canoga Park.
Okay.
And my aunt lived there. And she worked for Disney Studios in Burbank, I remember. And she was an opera teacher. And then I got, you know, put into this Catholic school, Chaminade.
Sure, I know it.
Chaminade in Woodland Hills.
I was a Val too. So then what did that do to your surfing? Did you have to put it on hold for a while? Or?
Yeah. I started getting into like BMX because that's what they did out there in the valley. You know, they did like skateboarding, BMX, but mainly not even skateboarding, more BMX in the valley.
Okay.
It was such the polar opposite of my upbringing in Hawaii. Catholic school is gnarly. The nuns would rack you with rulers. It was heavy duty, you know, and it was a prep school, military school before that.
Wow.
And so I was in 7th grade, and then my parents couldn't handle the smog, so they just drove south on the 405. And they started driving down to, you know, where the air was getting cleaner. And then they got somehow down the 55 on the Newport Peninsula, and they kept driving, and then they got to the end of the peninsula point. They couldn't drive anymore, and they saw a rental house down there. That was the Wedge. So I went to Newport, moved down there, and one house away was the Wedge, you know, on the other side of the alley. And that's where my whole Wedge thing started, was down there, you know, body surfing.
And at the time, though, the Wedge was primarily body surf. I mean, as I remembered, or as it was presented in the magazines, you were one of the first people to actually surf the Wedge.
Yeah, I think one of the first more hot doggers. There was guys that definitely went out there on long boards and other boards. And then there was a crew of locals that rode short boards like we were all kids. But I think I was the first one to kind of go out there more often when it got bigger and to kind of ride it in a more of a performance wave. Yeah, like what Jerry was doing at Pipe. I was trying to just copy him. Yeah. But yeah, and so, you know, and then someone took a picture of me and it got in the magazine, surfing magazine. So I go out there and I catch a wave on a homemade board I glass that Lance Collins made me at Wave Tools, and 7.6 pintail, yellow pintail. Got a wave. I was at school, and the older surfers on the surf team were like, dude, you're in the surfing magazine. And I was like, what? I never even had surfing magazine. You know, it was like on the newsstand. I couldn't afford a magazine. You had to go buy those things. But the older kids, they were all talking about it. And I was this like minority kid in this very, Newport was waspy white town. Sure. Like seriously, I tell people there was no black kids there. There was one Mexican kid, George Mendoza. There was one Asian, me, and there's 3 like brown skinned people at that school, you know. And so, but I think being from Hawaii, I got kind of like, you know, I got hazed. Everyone got hazed back in those days, but I got kind of a little bit of like recognition because I was in Surfing Magazine. It was such a big deal to be in the magazines. And
what was that picture?
It was a picture that this guy Sam Jones took of me on this yellow board, and I'm dropping in, and it looks like I'm trying to copy Jerry Lopez at Pipeline. It's a good sized wave for a little kid. I was, you know, probably 8th, 9th grade at the time. I was like, whoa, I was blown away. And it was so hard to keep my ego down because I was such a quiet, shy guy back then. Not like I am how I became, but like back then I was like super shy and quiet. And I was just like jumping out of my skin, just going, don't get excited. Don't act cocky. You know, just, you know, because those are all the things you learn as a kid in Hawaii. You just get your ass beat if you're cocky, dude. You get humbled. So I was just trying to be as, you know, because they were celebrating and all stoked for me, and you know, so that was the beginning of the whole Wedge thing. But
incredible. And then so from there, I know of the period of the polka dot surfboard, the polka dot board, which was Echo Beach basically. But between that first photo in the mag of you surfing the Wedge on the yellow board and Echo Beach, did you first start working with? Did your relationship with Quiksilver begin yet, or had it yet to begin?
It was just during that time when, you know, I was hanging out with my best friend at that time was actually Dave Palmer. I just want to say a few things about Dave.
Yeah, Dave
because
Palmer.
a lot of people don't know that about Dave and I. Like, we were best friends in 7th grade.
Okay.
And that was right during that time. I was surfing the Wedge. He was surfing the Point in a place called Mini V that he used to call, that we used to mimic all these spots. And, you know, Dave was the guy that really helped shape my knowledge about the history of surfing. The guy was so literate. He read every surfing magazine. Everyone used to go up to him, and the hazing they'd give Dave is they'd make jokes like, "What was in issue 5?" And he would verbatim tell you the article, who wrote it, Drew Campion, No Pants Lance, or he would just spit off the answer, and we're like, Incredible. Oh my gosh, that guy's insane. Like, he read, and then it was a kind of a joke that if you wanted to get an A on your English paper, you'd have Dave write it for you, instead of ChatGPT now or whatever. It was Dave Palmer, But Dave and I were super good friends. I watched him shape his first board, make a water housing. I took a picture of him. He did a magazine called Coyote Lines. It was rad when he moved to Cayucos. He wanted me to move to Cayucos with him, and I went up there in his van with his mom and Bam Bam before John was Bam Bam, and their dog Bandit in the green van. And I was so scared because his mom was driving up, and it gets so windy up through the passes going up to Cayucos, and I thought the van was going to crash because it was swerving, and it was just crazy. We're just, just this. His mom was kind of like a hippie, cool lady, and Dave's like, "Man, you can live with us, Danny," because I was like full latchkey, no parent vibe, and I was kind of thinking about it, but then I thought, gosh, at that age I was starting puberty, I think, and girls, and I remember getting to Cayucos and going, "There's no girls here, there's no people, like there's nobody, there's cows, and there's a bunch of guys in overalls and farmers, and I was like, Aggies, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do it." And so Dave moved, and that's when our friendship. But then they did an article on Dave and I in Breakout magazine called we're the yin and yang, as he became a famous ripping Cayucos Central Coast surfer, kind of like outdoorsman, and I was this disco polka dot guy. Echo Beach. It was I felt such like a clown, as I was a clown. But anyway, during that time, to answer your question, is when Preston Murray and I got caught stealing the shorts at Quiksilver, right?
Yeah, and this is such a good story, and I know it well because I've known you for many years. But many of our viewers probably don't know the story. So can you tell it?
Yeah. So back then, Quiksilvers came on the scene, and Surfing magazine was like the new mag. Surfer was the Bible, and Surfing was the new mag, kind of, pushing the Aussies and pushing, more of the new age pro surfing thing, and just high performance and, free ride, all that stuff. And it was all happening during that time. And Rabbit, MR, Sean Thompson, that whole crew, PT, they were like all wearing Quiksilvers, but they're expensive, and you couldn't find them. Like, you get OPs, Hank Tans, all that, but Quiksilvers were expensive, and I was poor, you couldn't get them, and we were little sizes. But so anyway, Preston found out where the Quiksilver little Quonset hut was. It was this little tiny small little warehouse, and up in Costa Mesa. And he said, we were down in Newport Shores, and he said, "Hey, I know where the place is." I go, "What place?" He goes, "Quiksilver." I said, "So what?" And he goes, let's go up there and let's go steal some shorts out of there." And I'm like, "No way, dude. Like, are you kidding me?" I go, we don't even have a car. I've got my permit, dude. We don't have he goes, "Dude, that's good enough. My mom's going to teach tennis lessons, and we'll just take the keys and take her car. She'll never even know. She does tennis lessons for like 2 hours at the club down the street. The car's in the garage, this yellow Vega with Aloha Surf Racks on the top, full 8-track tape. We're like busting out, like, we're playing like Pink Floyd songs in there, like it's like Peter, those days. And 8-track, so Preston's like, "We'll listen to some cool tunes and we'll go up there, and you just be the getaway driver, dude. I know you don't want to go steal them. I'll steal them. You just drive, and you just drive us up there because you got your permit." And I'm so small, seriously, I had to put like telephone books on the seat so we wouldn't get pulled over. It was that, like, how little I was. So I'm like, "Cool, I get to drive your mom's car. That's rad." So we drive up there, and Preston, we stop the car. I'm in the parking lot, just car running. He runs in the little warehouse, and he comes out with a stack of shorts. Not one. I thought he was going to go in there and grab us like 2 pairs, steal 2 pairs, like stealing candy from the store and come out and like, you dude, we got some Quiksilvers. And he comes out with a stack. And I'm like, my eyes bug out. And I'm like, dude, no, put those back. We're going to go to jail. That's too many. They'll know. And he's like, shut up. He throws them in the back, slams the thing, and we just burn out. And he just goes, punch it, get out of here. And we're like, we just dig out back to his house. And we get to his house and we're like throwing them all on the bed. And we're like, oh my God. It was like bank robbers, And we're like throwing the money on the bed, but they're all these Quiksilver shorts, like, I don't know, 20 pairs or something like that. And I'm like, and they were like $20 a piece. Yeah. $20, there was like Air Jordans. $20 back then was like $100, $150 or something. Shorts were $5, $2, $3. You get OPs and hang tens on sale. So we had them, but then we're like, they're size 36, bro. They're all 36 because the sizes were stacked. The little sizes, our sizes, were at the front where those guys had their office, and in the back of the warehouse went up to 36, but that was close to the door. So he grabbed the stack that was biggest close to the door and just bolted with those. So I go, oh, this is genius, Preston. Like, we got 36, we're 28-inch waists, and so we're like, oh my gosh. So he's like, dude, I got a plan. He always had a plan. He goes, we're going to go to their stores and we're going to just make up stories about how our grandmothers bought us these and she just thought we were fat and that she got us the wrong size. We're going to trade them for 28s. Mm-hmm. So we did that a few times. How lame is that? And meanwhile, as we're doing that, the shops are calling McKnight and Hackman going, dude, there's these kids down here, and they're trading in shorts. Did you guys get some big shorts missing out of your warehouse or something? And they're like, as a matter of fact, yes, we did. And they didn't know who we were, though. Okay. So then there's a kid on our surf team. I'm not going to name his name because but he knows who he is. But we were all competitive. When you're kids and you're on the surf team, and Preston and I were like number 1 and 2 on the surf team, and I'd be number 1 or he'd be number 1. We go back and forth, but we're the 2 best, and we're freshmen. So this other freshman friend of ours was kind of like down lower on the ranks, and he was like, he knew McKnight, and so we went to school and we were wearing our Quiksilver, our new shorts, kind of showing them off and just peacocking, kind of bragging, like, look at us, we got, no one even has these, we got them, like, where'd you get them, And then so he calls McKnight and narcs on us, so we get busted. So then I'll never forget the day, because this is like right around, I was going to drop out of school. My parents were breaking down. It was like just such a turmoil in my life. And then all of a sudden I get a call from Preston. And he's like, dude, we're busted. I'm like, what? I just got a call from McKnight and Hackman, and we need to go up there now. And I was like, what? I said, no way, dude. I'm not going. You take the, like, what? And he goes, yeah, someone narked on us. And so I was like, oh, no, I'm going to jail or juvie. Mm-hmm. So we go up there. And it's like Hackman and McKnight, and they're like, they got their arms folded, and they're looking at us, and they're just like, oh God, you guys are done. And at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, Preston had parents with money, so they go, you owe us this, pay us the money, we're gonna call Juvie Hall. Mm-hmm. We know you guys are dumb kids, and we've done stupid things too, so you can pay us back. Mm-hmm. But if you don't, we're going to call the authorities. You're going to juvie. So Preston pays his half back. I can't. I'm panicking. I go sell my couple boards. I had beaters, and I try to get money, and I don't have enough money. Mm-hmm. And I go back with my tail between my legs to Hackman and Bob, and I'm like, well, I guess you can call juvie or whatever. I don't have the money. I can go get a job or something, but I'm like a 15-year-old basically. And they're like, all right, no, dude, we got a bunch of chores around here. Toilets need to be cleaned, and shorts need to be snipped, and our cars need to be washed. I was like, what? I was like stoked, okay, I'm not going to go to juvie. Like, I'm going to work here. I'm going to be my summer job. So I started working there, and they started liking me because I was a really good worker. I'd show up on time, work hard, do anything, scrub toilets, do whatever. They'd go get lunch, I was doing everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember delivering lawyer papers because I just got my driver's license, driving one of Bob's van or something to LA to drop off legal papers to their trademark guy, stuff anything. Yeah. Then I paid them off and went back, tried to finish school, didn't, dropped out, and then Bob and Hackman were looking to, and Jeff McCoy came to town, Rip Curl wetsuits, claw and singing. And they all wanted to find, like, they were all in Costa Mesa, Newport. And they were like, hey, we want Groms. Like, who are the rippingest, hottest Groms in this town? And they didn't know. They were older. Jeff was like a surf star. He was like an older surf star, you know. And so they're like, well, let's call Newport Harbor High. You know, that's the local high school. That's probably where all the ripping beach kids surf. So they asked the surf team coach, and my name comes up, and they're like, what, dude? The thief kid, that Danny Kwock kid, he's the guy that he's like the number one guy on the team. No, and they're like, no. It was like this. And so I get another phone call from McKnight and Hackman, and they're like, hey, and I'm panicking because I'm thinking they changed their mind. They, you know, I paid them back the money, worked, but they're going to pound me more, you know. Because I remember Jeff and Bob would say, you know, and if we see you in the water, you paddle 100 yards away from us, or, you know, you just go in. You know, and I was like, dude, yeah, I'll do whatever, you know. So, but then I get this phone call, and McKnight and Hackman are like, hey, we heard you're a good surfer. We didn't even know. You know, you're just the worker kid, you know, and our little freaking, you know, gopher. So they said, we want to sponsor you. And I was, well, but we want to see you surfers. And I was like, I was jumping out of my skin. Incredible. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, I go from this kid that's just getting pummeled, gopher, I'm going to go to juvenile hall, to now they want to sponsor me. Like, there was sponsorships back then. I mean, it was like Rabbit had it, MR, Sean, you know, and they didn't even have contracts. But to get free clothes, I was like, what? It was like, you know, and so I did my. So I went down to 56th Street, and they're going to watch me surf, and Jeff McCoy was there. He wanted to watch me because he was like, he had Shane Horan, he had all the best surfers in the world
Mark
at the
Warren,
time.
Bruce Raymond.
He had MR rode his boards when he was a kid. You know, he was the groomer for all the rippers. Larry Blair, you know, like all these guys. And so Jeff McCoy, and Jeff was, dude, we all knew who Jeff McCoy was because of Shane and the Bronzed Aussies and all that. And I said, well, where's this Jeff McCoy guy? He goes, oh, he's not here, you know, whatever. And so I never even got to meet him. And so he goes, just go out surfing. He should be here pretty soon. So I went out surfing at 56. There's blown out chop, bad waves, head high. And I'm just out there surfing, you know, waves. And it's like my audition. And but like, there's no one out. It's so bad. And I'm just out there trying to just catch waves and having fun. And after about 30, 40 minutes, I come in and no McCoy on the beach, no one watching me. I'm like, going, dude, that's kind of sucks. You know, I come up and I go, I guess I'm not going to be on the team. You know, I guess this is just I got punked. This is like a hoax, you know? And then McCoy is in the house upstairs. He was on the balcony with binoculars watching me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you're watching me the whole time? I wasn't even trying that hard. Like, I was waiting for you to be on the beach. I would have tried harder. You know? He wanted to see me like improv, right? Not stress, just out there free. He wanted to see me free surf. So it was probably better for me. So I was looser or whatever. So and then I looked at him, and it was this full judgment day. I was getting ready for him to just say, you suck. You know? And he just goes, yeah, your boards suck, mate. And I was like, so your equipment's bad. I was like, but you know what? You got talent. And he goes, I'll get you one of my boards, and you'll be 50% better. So, and here's the deal. I want to sponsor you. But here's how it works. I get 3 tries. 3 strikes, you're out. I make you 1 board. If it works, great. Make you 2 boards. If it works and we connect, cool. If my third doesn't, you're out. So if I don't get it within 3 boards, because I know I've been making boards for everybody. I've watched you surf. I know what your goofy foot, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. First board he made me was like insane. Like so much better than like exactly what he said. And I was like, it was a double wing flyer. And it was like, and that's how I met Bruce Raymond.
Wow.
And, you know, so I went from, you know, being this kid that was like the rebel, whatever, board short bandit, to like this sponsored kid. And then I met Klon Singding, and I met, you know,
Klon Singding from Rip
Curl, and Don Craig and all those guys.
So now you're suddenly sponsored by Quiksilver, Rip Curl, and McCoy.
The trifecta of what everybody wanted to be sponsored by.
And there was such a strong Aussie
I think
influence.
You got sponsored by all those things.
I did those were my first 3 sponsors, and you were my my marketing manager, my team manager.
No, it was a big deal. Like Richard Wolcott, everyone wanted to be sponsored by the trifecta. The 3 Aussie companies, because they were the coolest at the time. And what's so interesting about that time, for me, when I think back on it, is how strong of an influence Australia
paranoia was on us. And there was music at the time. There was like Men at Work. There was Midnight Oil. There were all these bands. There were the Jack McCoy movies.
Yeah, Gang of
In Excess. Yeah. And it was, we got introduced to not only like all these new people, these new characters and this kind of, and new group of pro surfers, but this whole culture came with it too.
Yeah, it was such a, it was, busting down the door. I mean, I get why the Hawaiians were so pissed because the Aussies were so cocky and but they were good, and they were between them and Sean, basically, they were busting down the door, but I was still, from being from Hawaii, I was still partial. I mean, I loved the Aussies and that whole thing, but I still had such mad respect for, Michael, Jerry, BK, all the boys from Hawaii. Like, sure. I always did. Dane Kealoha, he was so insane. Yep. And rest in peace, but and Buttons, dude. Buttons. Oh my gosh, he was my hero. That guy was insane. So and Bertelman too, but the Aussies just had the attitude. They were competitive, and so contest surfing wasn't a thing before that, and it was just starting to become a thing. And all those people were they were so competitive. The Aussies, McCoy was into it. Yeah. The Rip Curl Claw on them, they had the Bells Classic and Quiksilver trials and.
Yep, and it all landed right in your backyard, which was Costa Mesa, which we sometimes call Velcro Valley, but it was so much surf industry kind of happened there. But so at this time, so now you've got Rip Curl, Quiksilver, McCoy, and now you're charging the Wedge and you're getting in the magazine, and so begins the Echo Beach period.
Well, and and here's the thing, because as I look back at all this stuff, and I was like, I was during my hardship years, I was always in search of a father. I didn't have a father figure. Parenting, I had abandonment issues. I had all kinds of different issues that I would find out later in life. But that's why the thing with Duke, and then all these guys that were like Jeff McCoy, he was like a dad to me. Lance Collins from Wave Tools was like a dad. They were all like these father figure guys. And McKnight and Hackman and Bruce Raymond, Alan Green, Claw Singding. Like, I looked at all these men, and then I was just like, I wasn't looking at them like other surf kids. I was looking at them like, I want to learn everything they said, every word they spoke. I just went right into my soul. Like, I just that was my school. I was like, these are my elders. They run surf companies. They're surfers. This is it, and so it's and I remember them saying something very odd to me at that time. They're like, we're going to make you a surf star. And then I watched it happen. And because they would go to the mags, they'd set me up with their staff photographers to shoot me, not just some guy down the street who got his new camera. Yeah. And they knew that guy, if he got a good shot of me, he would get in the mags. They were doing ads supporting the mags, and this was our guy. So they're like pushing me, and I'm like, whoa, this is bizarre.
Yeah. It was so radical because I think the whole kind of 70s aesthetic or ethos was very much like you pretended like you didn't want that stuff.
Yeah, it was anti.
Whereas the whole Echo Beach scene was like, hey, we are hams. We're ready to jump right in front of the camera and do whatever you want. And I remember, because I came onto the scene at that time, I was a little kid, but there was the thing of the bright wetsuits, and it actually helped the manual focus camera to focus on your thing. But I remember there was a great cover of you in a backside barrel, like a very intimate shot of you like laying back in the tube, and you had a red, white, and blue suit on.
Yes. That was my first cover, and I had a few different other cover type scenarios, but that was my cover, and it came out on my birthday in 1980. I was surfing on the tour at, in Bells Beach, and I saw it in this milk bar, and I was like, oh my gosh. Mike Moore had shot it. I remember my fins ran him over on his water housing on that wave and put a little cut on his face. I was that close to him. I just went by him in the tube. And just almost cut his face off. And he was just like, dude, your fin hit my water housing, scratched it, but I got the shot. And I was like, okay. And then, boom, it was on the cover. But even those colorful wetsuits and all that, I remember at first, like Pat O'Neill, the O'Neill guys were like, they were like the purists, right? No way, no colors. But those wetsuits at Rip Curl, I got that. I would go down and get custom wetsuits made. And Klon Singding, they were like, these kids are crazy. Because we're like, oh, you guys can make custom wetsuits. Just like Quiksilver could make custom board shorts. And that's where, the first thing that happened, were the wetsuits, the colored wetsuits. Because Sean had wore a yellow wetsuit at Pipe, and it was like, whoa, he's wearing a color. PT had a pink surfboard. MR had bright lightning bolts, So we started getting bright wetsuits. And then it was like we'd get heckled everywhere we went, you know, but the only reason why I didn't get super heckled because we could surf, you know, so, but we were clowns. And then the polka dot thing was just basically like when I was a kid, I had a polka dot clown and I just thought it was funny and I just wanted to be a goofball and make people laugh. So I just put polka dots on my boards, you know, and Quiksilver was really getting boring at the time with their old Hawaiiana shorts and their brown, you know, and I was like, oh man, this punk rock new wave, it's like a whole different thing, you know, and I was young and kind of crazy at the time. And so did the polka dot board, and I didn't even wear the Quiksilver shorts. I put on my girlfriend's at the time. She had these, you know, running dolphin shorts, red and white striped dolphins. Remember those shorts, things? They would fall off when you'd surf. They had no drawstring. They were for girl runners, or Richard Simmons, that workout dude, would wear them, you know, with this afro. So I wore those shorts thinking, oh man, this is a full clown outfit. You know, just as a joke. I got a polka dot board, and I got, you know, and this is like before logos on boards, you know, there was no logos. It was just the McCoy logo. Yeah. So I go out with the polka dot thing, with the striped shorts. It's a sunny day in Newport. Some guy, boom, they've been taking pictures of me before, so this guy gets a shot, spread surfing for the summer issue of like 1979. And it's like, it bust into the 80s then, you know, and it was like, and after that, you know, Bob's like, whoa. And so I get a pair of pink homemade checker shorts made. And I put the first Echo Beach ad goes in, and I'm sitting on the beach wearing these pink shorts with black and white checkers. There'd been no checkers in the magazines. Yeah. And then after that, it was like, and Bruce Raymond actually named Echo Beach after Bondi Beach.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
And yeah.
It was so...
and then it's just exploded. Vans, checker shoes. I mean, everything. Wave tools, checkerboards, and polka dots. And Tony Alva was doing a different version of craziness too, up in Dogtown.
Yes, I remember being at Marina Skate Park and seeing Tony wearing wraparound sunglasses, which were so freakish because they were not. It was like it went from sort of Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, and then suddenly it was new wave and punk. Yeah, and it was the music was really driving it. But so tell me, so you're a pro surfer, or you're a surf star. But then somewhere you had the kind of wisdom, perhaps, to transition into more working behind the scenes and facilitating other surfers and building Quiksilver.
Yeah, you know, so my dream was to get on the cover. You know, I won the Echo Beach contest challenge that there was the top pros in it. Sean was in it, Shane Horan, you know, and Jay Riddle and I beat Preston and Shane Horan. So I was like, wow, I've surfed against the best surfers in the world. Like, we got first. Like, okay, but it wasn't an ASP or IPS at the time or whatever it was called. But I was really bad at surf contests. I didn't like it. I mean, it was just tough on me. I just like free surfing. So, you know, but there was that inflection point, and it was when I was in Hawaii. I was working, you know, and I was like, Jeff Hackman would say to me, he and I were roommates. He was my boss. He was the first president at Quiksilver, and then Bob became president after that. But Jeff, when I was living with him, said to me, you know, Danny, he said, you surf good, but you're never going to be like that guy. Mm-hmm. You just don't have it in you. And it seems like you like this work thing. You know, you dig like designing shorts and clothing and the process, and you love making kids surf stars. Because like, what happened to you? Like, you like giving back and making other guys what we did to you. You know, you like to give back and do. And I said, yeah, I do. You know, he goes, you know, and I'm like, was the guy. Me and Jerry, you know, we're in our era. And he goes, you know, it's great, but I'll tell you what, I think if I'm you, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm just going to use some input. Like, you should learn the business. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, Jeff, you know, and so The Performers was our first surf video was coming out, a movie called The Performers. And we're doing
Jack McCoy, yes. Such a great film.
Jack McCoy was filming it. Yep. And it was, you know, it was Willie Morris, and it was, you know, Rabbit and Kong and
Richard Cram,
Mickey one Nielsen. Of my favorite. Yeah. So anyway, The Performers, and I was supposed to be in the original Performers, right? I was one of the guys for that movie. And I remember being in my office and Jack McCoy calling me, going, Kwock, get over here, man. It's pumping, Rockies, pipe, you know, every sunset. The boys are here. We're filming. We're getting tons of shots of everybody. We got to film your part. You got to get over here. And I'm like working, doing contracts, designing, helping do shorts and design and whatever, all the stuff at work. And, you know, because it was do it yourself, Bob and I and everybody, we did everything. We'd ship, inventory, whatever, you know, and go to the contractors. And so I'm like not surfing that much, and I get to Hawaii and it's pumping, the waves are good, but I got some good boards and I'm feeling pretty good. But all I keep hearing from Jack is, dude, there's this guy, one of your team riders here, no one knows him, but we got some killer shots of him at Pipe, and he went, this spot and this spot. And I go, who is it? It was Mickey Nielsen. And I'm like, oh yeah, Mickey's insane, dude. That guy's gnarly. Yeah. Cause I was had so much joy in finding talent and putting them on the team. That was it was like finding Easter eggs on an Easter egg hunt, and then, the golden egg was like the guys like Kelly or Curran and those kind of guys. But Mickey was insane, like local ripper from Sandy's, and I just thought he was like the best, just personality too, and just marketable and just great guy. And he was gnarly. Mm-hmm. I remember just sitting there going, I told Jack, I said, hey, you know what? Don't film me anymore. But Jack said, okay, well, who's it going to be then? You're the boss. You're the guy, with the team in America. So who's your pick? And I go, dude, you already got killer shots of Mickey. Put Mickey in the movie. They're like, oh, but he's like nobody know. I go, they'll know him. If you've got good shots of him, trust me. You put him in the movie with all the stars like Willie Morris, Wes Lane, Richard Cram, Bryce Ellis, Chappie, Kong Rabbit, Marvin. He will be right there with them, and he can hold his own. Like he is definitely someone that can surf sunset, surf pipe, surf small waves, surf V-land, whatever. And he wants it, and he's young. Yeah. So I gave up my spot.
Nice.
And it was really hard because I knew that movie was going to be
such a great movie.
Like a Slater black and
It
white.
didn't quite have the life it probably should have, because I don't know if the music was licensed and it was all the best music.
No, it was all ripped off music from
So now you're kind of behind the scenes at Quiksilver, but you also understand kind of the way in which the whole thing works,
right,
because you've done it yourself.
Yeah.
And so now you're kind of ushering kids along and showing them how to basically make a career out of surfing.
Yeah.
And then of course you got to watch not watch, but you were instrumental in Quiksilver just exploding and surfing kind of exploding, going to places we never could have imagined.
Oh yeah, and then there was the clothing side, like making clothes. Like we only made board shorts and t-shirts, and maybe a couple hats and some stickers. Like there was no and then so that's where I'll just pivot into this little short story because it involves you, Jamie. Okay. And we, I remember I told Bob, I go, hey man, Gotcha's making some clothes, and Maui's making some shorts, and people are making dress shirts. Like we need to make real clothes. Bob's like, real clothes? I go like real clothes, like people, not just surf trunks, but real clothes that surfers want to wear because we're a surf company. He's like, okay, we need a designer for that, because Bob and I were designing everything. It was like just like full on piece of paper and just like, okay, make this, Mm-hmm. And so we get this designer from LA, and she ended up working at Hurley, Leanne, and so we do these real clothes. And Jamie, that's where you come in, because remember you were one of our young Groms.
I remember that.
I was like, we need to shoot ads with not guys surfing, but guys wearing our clothes, but there are surfers, and they're like, they look good in clothes, and they're cool, and they're from different territories. So I used you, Willie Morris, Jay Adams. I used skaters. I mixed them in with you guys. I used Craig Cottle. There was Chris Colpin.
Yep. And there was a lot of denim, and there was Brian Bielman was
Brian
the photographer.
Bielman shot the photos.
And Bielman was doing that interesting. There was a Polaroid where he would peel them back, and they would be really like the edges would be all kind of
it was
nasty.
distorted. It looked very punk. It was like, Christian Soy was in it. I used Christian before he went to prison. And and that was a huge deal for us, because that's then that kind of turned into Quiksilver saltwater denim. With all the stuff with Strider and Shane Beshin and the whole thing. And that was a big thing that Strider brought, was that all those thoughts, and he kind of came in that next level. But yeah, so there was all those things happening with clothing, and, and it's like, I just kind of like let it all go to and I started having to pivot as it really serves me still now in life, to always, the only constant is change, and you're constantly evolving, and you can either fight it or you can lean into it, right?
No, and it's interesting, Danny, because I think because you love surfing so much and you were a great surfer, you had an instinct for what, there's a way in which like a really great surfer can look out at the ocean, watch someone, and the moment they pop to their feet, you can tell how good they are. It's just so there. And you had that, but then you also had the kind of like your fingers in popular culture in such an interesting way.
Yeah.
And at the time, surfing was sort of cross-pollinating with these other things. And as I remember it, this is right around the time that Andy Warhol launched Interview magazine, and Quiksilver was one of the first sponsors.
We were the, Andy and Interview, they called me, and, I didn't even really, I knew of Andy Warhol Studio 54, and we all wanted to go there, and we eventually did go. It was crazy, that place. But like, Andy Warhol was this sort of older guy who I had found out that he lives up in Montauk. He digs surfing. He's trippy. He's got this white hair and these glasses, and he speaks funny, and he's just super artsy in New York, and he's just out there. He's like a David Bowie kind of guy. He's one of those guys like, Ziggy Stardust, kind of bigger than life character from the art culture world of New York and East Coast. But somehow, they get to me, Interview magazine, because Quiksilver was becoming like the coolest happening young pop culture, surf culture brand. And so they get in touch with me, and then, Warhol's like, he wants Quiksilver, because Quiksilver could be in the magazine. I was like, whoa, yeah. I'm like, yeah, for sure. And I didn't tell the guys at work because it wouldn't have been approved in the budget. Just like signing Slater and doing stuff in the future. I was like a rule breaker, and I just did stuff, improv, flying off the cuff. Probably should have got fired for all of it. I just winged it just because if it was fun and I thought it was going to just blow minds and it was gonna be crazy, and we're stepping out of our comfort zone and we're doing crazy new different things, I'm going for it. Yeah. So it was like, yeah, we're gonna be like, because it was all gonna be like fashion companies and luxury companies and art companies and music, record, rock labels, and we're gonna be the only surf brand in that ad, like in that magazine. I'm like, we're in. Yep. So we do the ad in Interview magazine and the issue, and then they had this party, and I got invited from Warhol and those guys. So I get, Andy's going to be there. He wants to meet you. I'm like, oh, I'd love to meet that dude, but then we went, I think it was like Mickey Nielsen and Taz, and we went surfing Rincon. Because I'll never forget, like we're up surfing Rincon. I think Taz got in a fight. He beat some guy up at Rincon, broke my board over the guy's face, and Michael Ho was laughing, just going, dude, we told you that guy's crazy. Taz, that guy's a nut, and I was like, oh my gosh. And we're driving the Quiksilver van down, and it was seriously like Spicoli, just joints, beers, like smoke coming out. We're all salty, dirty, been surfing Rincon all day, and I'm like, oh, you guys, we got to stop in LA on the way to Noops. I go, what? They're like, dude, what for? And I'm like, will there be food there? It's just like, yeah, there'll be really good food, man. There'll probably be champagne and stuff. It's just it'll be this full Hollywood party with like, rock stars and movie stars. They're like, who cares? Like surfers don't care about that stuff. They're like, just food, dude. Is there going to be food? We're all stoned, And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm like, okay, we just got to pull off the 405. It's in LA, and I'll pop in, dude. We'll go in there, we'll get some food. I'm on the list, dude. And they're like, okay, Interview magazine. They don't even know what Interview magazine is. Like, they don't even know Andy Warhol. It's like, so we go there, and I remember we're like, it was like Spicoli. We pull up in the van again. The door opens. There's like paparazzi, everything. And there's like people like Madonna, like just, it's like straight up gnarly Hollywood A-listers. And I pull up at the van, and there's the bouncers there looking at us going, no. Like at the valet line, we get out, and there's like, there's like Porsches and all these fancy cars, and we roll up with the van with racks on it, and just like pot smelling. It was just, and we get up to the front, and they just look at us, and they're like, the bouncer looks at me, and he's like, no effing way, dude. You're not coming in this thing. Like, beat it. Like, you guys are a bunch of scrubs. Like, get out of here. Like, and everyone's looking at us because everyone's like dressed up to the nine. Everyone's artsy, and they're all hipsters, and we're just like surf rats, Yep. So I'm looking through to go see. I go, man, I'm on the list. I'm telling you, Danny, Kwock, Quiksilver, like, seriously, we did an ad in this magazine. I got invited this part. They're like, no, dude. And they're getting ready to boot me. And I get to the front line, and I'm like arguing with this big bouncer. And the guys, my few bros behind me, the guys are just like laughing. They're just like, we're out of here, dude. Let's go back to Noops, get some Del Taco or Taco Bell. Yeah. And so I look, and then I see Andy. He's like looking through the door, and he sees the commotion because he's like, oh, is someone going to come and just start a chaos? Is like a bad, a fight or something? And so he sees me. And he comes up to the bouncer, and everyone's like, whoa, everyone's like around Andy, like it's his deal, Andy Warhol. And I see him, the white-haired guy, coming towards the door. And he's like, oh, Danny, this is Quiksilver. And I was like, yo, you're Andy Warhol. I recognize, it's like, and he's like, let the surfer boys in.
That's so great.
And he's like, oh my God, I'm so glad you could make it. And I was like tripping, dude. And he puts his arm around me and I'm walking through the party with him with all these like A-listers looking at me and Andy Warhol going, who the heck is that guy? Like he smells like pot. His hair's all dirty and hideous. He's just salty. They're just grungy like kids. And I go and he's got this like throne. He's sitting on this big chair with this stack of magazines next to me. He goes, come here, sit next to me. I want to show you the magazine. And I said, like, he cuts me, and there's people waiting in line to get autographs. And this book sign or his magazine sign. And I'm like, no, man, I just want to get some food. And like, thanks for saying hi. We got to go. He's like, no, come sit here. So he sits me next to him, and I'm like, going, oh man, I was like, oh, I got to do this, and everyone's looking at us, and I'm kind of feeling like this must be super special. Like I feel bad because he cut me in the line in the front of everybody. And there's some gnarly people, I'm not going to name drop, but there's like some full-on A-listers in that line. So I sit next to him, and he's like, oh, what do you think about the, and it's Mick Jagger on the, he goes, I painted Mick, and, and I'm like, whoa, yeah, I know Mick Jagger, like I'm not really, kind of into the Clash, not in the Stones anymore, but I like the Stones, history. And he's like, and he's like showing me I did the art. I'm like, oh, that's killer, and and it's a big, I like how big the magazine is. And he starts flipping through the pages and he's showing me, he goes, here's your ad. And I'm like, oh, cool. He goes, thank you so much. And he goes, can I sign you a magazine? And I'm like, I was like, okay, how long is it going to take? Because we want to go and eat and just bail.
Yeah.
I said hi, and so he signs me like 5 magazines. Well, here's some of your friends over there too. I love surfers, I love surfing. I'm just like, dude, he's all about surfing. And I was at that point I went, it fascinated me how like so many other people from other different walks of life love surfing.
Yeah.
I thought only us surfers like surfing, on the coast. But people all over love surfing.
Yep. And
so then I remember he gave me those mags, and I lost them. I threw them in the van on the ground in the sand in the wetsuits, and I was like, and I would tell the story, and everyone's like, yeah, BS, dude. And then like 20 years later, one of my friends found the mag.
Wow.
And because I'd framed it, and it was cheesy, like full cheesy Aaron Brothers frame, and I framed it somehow, just one of the ones, because the other ones got ripped and thrown away. And it just got stuck somewhere, but someone found it. Yeah. And they gave it back to me. And it's in my band room over there. You should see it.
That's so great.
It's still signed by him and everything, dude. It's hilarious. But
it's so great. But I think of that as being very kind of telling of what was going to happen sort of in the years ahead. Because I remember when I first got on the Quiksilver team. Yeah. The factory warehouse was on Production Place. It was tiny. Your place would have been like the size of a desk. Yeah. And then Quick moved over, and it was a massive, massive building. And in your office were all these signed pictures, and it was like Pat Riley, who managed the Lakers. Oh, yeah. Mel Gibson. And I recognize, I got to watch
David Geffen. There's so many people,
David Geffen,
pro athletes.
And it sort of surfing connected with so many people that we didn't. I had no idea that this thing that we were doing that my parents warned me about, that didn't want to encourage me hanging out with guys like you guys with the Spicoli van.
Yeah, exactly.
Was suddenly going to be like this thing that would expand and be such a fascination for people on the outside of it. What was it like in that kind of ride with Quiksilver through, let's say, like the early 80s into the mid 90s?
It was so crazy. The people that we were hanging out with, like, the rock stars like Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols. And, there was just so many people Malcolm McLaren. And we were hanging out with all these random, Lauren Hutton, this famous model. Yeah. It was kind of like nuts back then, and I remember like this guy David Geffen, who DreamWorks and all that, he was a huge iconic music industry mogul. He was sending me tapes of like guys to like put music into our surf movies, because they wanted to be, when it was the time where we got busted for Pink Floyd and using all those those songs. They were like, no, you can't use them. And then it was like the industry changed, and it was like Geffen was like the first one to go, no, these are unknown guys. Yep. He'd send me these box of cassettes with all these like racks of like bands that he was signing or looking at. And I remember like I would bring our designers in and be like, dude, let's listen to these music. I've never even heard of these bands. Have you heard of this band? This band Nirvana? Have you ever heard of this band Weezer, Beck? You know, they became famous. And I remember like I would get in contact with them, and I was sending Beck clothes. You know, they were like known. They were like just starting.
Yeah.
Like in fact, one of my friends, Neil Harrison, who works for Volcom, that was he goes, dude, that was the first time I ever heard Kurt Cobain, Nirvana. It was in your office from those tapes, and I go right. And then same thing with Eddie Vedder. We used Mother Love Bone music and Kelly Slater Black and White.
Yeah.
And then the guy ODs and dies, and we love his music, right? But their Epic Records like, no, he's dead. And we're like, oh, no, man, we want to use his music in our next video. And they were like, we got a new band. We can come and meet you. And I was like, and let you hear the music. I was like, cool. So they come in. And that's when I met Eddie Vedder. And I go, what's your name? He's like, Pearl Jam. And I'm like, oh, what's that? What's Pearl Jam? And they go, oh, it's a funny story, whatever. But so then Eddie gives me this little tape. He goes, here's the music. Put it in the little boombox in my office. And I'm just going, whoa, dude, you are gnarly.
Guy's got a voice.
And within seriously a year or so, he was like, you know, like they're on the cover of Time magazine type stuff. It was, the grunge thing was crazy. But stuff like that happened all the time.
Yeah. No, and it was, I got to watch it. And what's interesting is as much as surfing was expanding out to the mainstream in this way, there was also like a Wild West element, and you and I have talked about this before, but you dealt with some wild characters in the surf culture. And you seem to know how to do it, probably coming from Hawaii and probably being of that yourself, like being, you know, you got your job stealing board shorts. So what was it like dealing with some of the kind of wild animal characters?
It was super gnarly. I mean, I have nothing but mad respect and love for all these characters. But I'll just give a few, but Marvin Foster, for instance, you know, Marvin was the most literate. No one knew. This guy spoke the gnarliest pidgin, West Side, you know, everyone was scared of him. He was gnarly. And he'd write me letters that were in perfect, like John Millie style. Like just, I was like, whoa, bro, where did you learn to write like that? You know? And I was like, that's like someone's penmanship. And it was just these, but he couldn't speak that way. He could write that way.
Okay.
And I published one of his letters when he was in prison because he wanted to share with the kids, you know, hey, don't end up like me in prison and do stupid crap. And now I can't go surfing. I'm locked in this box. And I thought that was a good message to send to the surf world. And I put a big shot of him at Pipe and I ran his letter and it was super controversial. But a guy like Marvin, I remember one time, you know, he and I we're talking about contract stuff, and I told him maybe, you know, because he asked for something. I said, well, maybe. Well, maybe to him was yes. But maybe was like, well, I don't want to say no, but I don't want to say yes. Let me go back to the mainland and figure this out with the accountants, and if we have the money, and they're like, no. So I call him back. I go, hey, Marvin, it's no. So he's pissed. So I go to Hawaii that winter, and Mickey's like, oh, I'm picking you up at the airport. And I'm like, and I'm thinking, oh, you know, I'm going to see Marvin. He's cool. You know, I talked to him on the phone. Well, I didn't know he's pissed. Mickey takes me to Rocky Point. Hey, let's go check the waves before we go to your house. So we go check the waves, walk out on the beach. From the corner of my eye, this dark shadow just smacks me in my head. Bang, my head just, you know, slaps me. And that's worse than getting punched. You know, I'd rather have gotten punched, but I got smacked with a palm so hard in the side of my face, and my whole face was like bruised and, you know, just like instant blood, just smack, because Marvin was so strong and gnarly. He smacks me. I go flying. I hit the ground. My face is in the sand. Mickey grabs the back of my shirt, lifts me up, picks me up. Marvin's looking at me, goes, hey, don't lie to me ever again. And I was like, what? And I'm his boss, you know? And I go, lie. You said maybe you're going to, I said, maybe's not yes. He goes, it's not no, it's yes. It was just like, so every time they're forward, anytime Marvin asked me something, I'd be like, hey, can I go on this trip to so? I'd be like, no, and no. And we'd be cool. He'd respect it, you know? And it just, no one in Hawaii, like that whole salesmanship, kind of like you're very direct. And they'll respect you. You know, you just tell it like it is. Be respectful, be honest, straight up, and it'll be good. But I got I wasn't dishonest. I was just using wordmanship, right? And he smacked me, man. And I never forgot that, you know, and there's many, I mean, one time this other character, he wanted a contract. So they freaking grabbed me and tipped me over upside down at this house. And they make a funnel and put it in my nose, and one guy puts his hand on my mouth, and they got a big bag of blow, and they're just throwing it in the funnel. So I have to inhale the blow going into my nose.
Wow.
And I'm just like, wait, I sponsor these guys and they want raises and this is how they're negotiating? I'm like, are you freaking kidding me, dude? We laugh about it, but it was like, I was tripping, dude.
Yeah.
Because I'm breathing in these drugs, just going, oh, and then I tap their ankle. They're just like, tap out when you're done. And then I tap out and they let me go, and they're like, so I got my contract right. I go, yeah. I'll figure it out when I get back to Cali. Dude, like stuff like.
What's so incredible to me, Danny, is like hearing stories like this and knowing all the people you're mentioning and knowing that kind of Wild West environment. But then you probably like going to lunch with Mel Gibson or Pat Riley, like you were kind of had a foot in these two worlds. And it was interesting because Quiksilver and surf industry and surf culture was sort of toggling between these two things.
Yeah. So, another crazy story was one time me and Mickey and Marvin and Ronnie Burns, rest in peace, I put him in his first ad at Pipes, such an insane ripper from Hawaii.
Yeah, I
and that
remember
guy
him.
was so amazing.
Yep.
Such a ripper. Like to me, he felt like what would have been like a Goofy Foot Andy Irons at the time, but he was a pipe rider, but he could rip small waves too, but died way too young. But anyway, this one time, me, Ronnie, Mickey, Marvin, and we went out to go get mushrooms, and we just went out early and ate mushrooms, and then we went to the west side to go surf out, like third out, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go surf west side. Like frying, basically. I was like, oh my God. Like, these are the things that I got pulled into and just was curious and going, okay, man, I've never done these, so today's a good day. And the waves were cracking, and I remember just seeing those guys ripping, and I was paddling out just in the colors, and it was so glistening, and I was just like, I didn't even care to catch waves. I was just looking at it going, oh my gosh, like, it was like slow. I saw like colors going by in the air and the spray and the noise. I was just like, I'll never forget that stuff. It was just, and it really, a lot of those things, having that openness and curiosity and willingness, I think in my mind, and having no fundamental schooling, was so much of how I applied into the workplace and how I dealt with people and did things. It was very, very, it was just like how I got into faith, and opened myself up to, my faith and looking vertical and stuff. It was just like, that was a whole nother journey, but that's another story. But, those times were crazy. They were crazy VIPs, and then the crazy rock star surfers. And I remember one time when I was on the tour in 1980 and I was, at Torquay, and in comes walking in this little party, because there'd be these parties after you surf during the trials or the day of surfing. Then there'd be these night parties in the town, and all the surf girls, chicks would come, and the groupies and whatever. But Torquay was like this very country place. And anyway, so I was at this little party, just sitting there, kind of like the young nobody kid from California, just like, and in comes walking, two guys that were like the biggest rock stars to me from Australia at the time, Wayne Lynch and Michael Peterson. And I'm just like, whoa, those are the guys I've seen in the mags and the movies, Morning and all those movies, and just like, they're here, and like, they're in real life. It's like I'm backstage, but they come to this party. I'm sitting in this nerd room by myself where the record player is, and all the parties by the kegs in the kitchens is raging. They walk in the door, and Wayne's barefoot, and it's freezing outside. He's barefoot. Michael Peterson's got this like leather jacket, and they're all just hammered, and Michael's talking to me, and he doesn't know, he just sees me. I'm this little brown skinned kid from Hawaii, he probably thinks, and he's just talking to me like, hey man, he's just slurring, and Wayne comes stumbling in, and there's broken beer bottles by the front door, and he's just stepping on them, and his feet are just getting cut up, and he's bleeding, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and he's staggered, and then he sees MP, and I don't know their relationship, but they kind of got this like competitive, like, one's a goofy, one's a regular. They're both iconic gods in Australia, but they're both like these rock star rebel, because surfing was like that. Like that was part of the gig, man. You were like, you were the real deal. and they're just and they're just carrying on. I can't even understand them because their Aussie twang's so gnarly, but all I remember them saying is like, kid, they're going to the record player, and I'm like just getting close to them like the kid and Almost Famous, going, man, I'm here with these guys. Where's my friends? Where's the camera? I want a picture with these. It's like a selfie. And then, but it's a dark little room, and they're just carrying on, and they're just giving each other crap. They're just ripping on each other. And then they're like, they finally go to the albums to put a song on because, it's record players back then. And they're like, and they grab the Doors album, and they're just pulling each other like, mate, and Wayne's like, he's like, kid, put on LA Woman, and they're like trying to hand me the record because they're so buzzed they can't even get the needle on the record. And so I got the record, and I'm like, okay, Wayne, what song do you want? He's like, LA Woman, and I'm like, oh, I love LA Woman, I'm going to put on that one. I'm about to put it on, and then Michael Peterson looks at me and he's like, now, mate, that one gnarly song, This Is the End, that dark, gnarly, scary, and I'm going, I don't like that song as much. It's rad, but it's super dark, LA Woman's more of a party song, LA, and I'm from California, I'm like, and then they're arguing, and I think I put LA Woman on, but then they started dancing. It was just this crazy, like,
so great,
memorable, like, iconic moment, that I've never told anybody.
No, that's a beautiful story, and I have my own version of those, and I think probably a lot of surfers listening will have their version of that. But it's amazing how just the like mythology of surfing, the mythical figures that we have, and how much they mean to us, and in many ways it all traces back to just like such a deep love of surfing and seeing someone stand on a board in a way that just connects. It's like listening to music, it just like cuts right into us. On that note, Quiksilver is a huge brand. You've been there for a decade or more. And there's this kid, Kelly Slater, who's on the market to launch onto the Pro Tour. And before that is, I guess, well, let's take it back to like Kelly Slater in Black and White, producing that, and then signing Kelly Slater, basically, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So I want to say one thing before that Kelly thing, and the one thing I want to say, because I want this to be in here, is that when Jeff Hackman and I, because it's such an iconic event, the Eddie Cal contest, right?
Yes.
So we get a call from Eddie Rothman. Jeff says, "Hey, Eddie Rothman called us." I was like, "Oh no, are we in trouble? Like, what did we do?" Because
Eddie Rothman of the Hui,
because Quiksilver sponsored the Hui.
Yep.
So I'd never been to Eddie's house. Jeff's like, we're going to Eddie's house on the top of Sunset. And I'm like, whoa, what for? He goes, he wants to talk to us. And I was like, ooh. So we drive up there, and I'll never forget, I was so scared because he had these pit bulls, and I was kind of scared of pit bulls because when they bark and get all gnarly, like, I was like, and they were growling, they're charging our car, going up the hill, our rent-a-car. And then he's yelling at them, get back in here, and he just throws them in their cage or their area. And I get out, and he goes, he's like, sorry, bro. My dogs, they don't like the tire sound of gravel, and they just go bite them, and just I'm like, and bite your leg on the way to. So he just gets him in there. So we go in his house, and then Eddie's super calm and just very focused, and he goes, hey, you guys, I think you guys should do like the Duke Hanamoko Surfing Classic. They don't have that anymore, but it should be the Eddie Cal Invitational. And I was like, whoa, that's rad. Because I'd watched Eddie win the Duke one time when I was a kid, when I was sitting on the beach, and I was like, dude, Eddie was like this Duke Hanamoko God figure guy, lifeguard. Sure. And so Jeff and I were like looking at each other going, whoa, that's an insane idea. So that was the birth of the Eddie Cal contest. But back to Kelly Slater.
Yeah.
So Kelly, again, this has to do with Jeff Hackman. Mm-hmm. Jeff and I go on this East Coast tour, and Jeff, we meet. Everyone knows Jeff, right? And people know me, but Jeff's this legend. So Gary Proper and Dick Cattree and all those guys, they go, hey, you guys need to meet these little kids from Florida. They're going to be world champions one day. And we're like, what? Like, I'm thinking, I'm pretty good. I think I might be world champion, 10-year-olds, because it wasn't, back then it wasn't like now where kids were getting groomed. It was like, and so in comes Kelly and Sean Slater. And they're going, this is Kelly and Sean Slater. And I'm like, oh, those are really good looking kids. Big white smiles, good looking, super stoked roms, like pumped to meet us, because they're like, oh, these guys are in the magazines, Jeff Hackman, Danny Kwock. And I'm like looking at them, eyeing them up, going, man, they're marketable. I'm looking at them going, man, when they grow up, if they keep those looks and that whole scene and their spark and stoke, I mean, they were just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So Jeff and I brought all these Echo Beach shorts and little sizes, like, to just give away swag. So I looked at their waist, and I'm going, they're probably 22, 24-inch waist. So me and Jeff throw Kelly the star shorts, and he's just like, yeah, dude. We give him shorts. I think I gave Sean like stars or polka dots or checkers or whatever, and Kelly got the star shorts. And, that's when we met Kelly.
Incredible.
And then, fast forward, gosh, it was might be 8 more years. And, everyone was saying he's going to be the guy. I'm like, that's the kid.
Yeah. So, as I remember it, I want to say Kelly was sponsored by OP for a while before.
Yeah, well, he was kind of a bidding war, right? Yeah, he was Sundeck. He was a lot of different people, and then he was with OP and kind of following Tommy Curran's footsteps. Exactly. And everyone wanted him. OP gotcha. Everyone wanted him. Everyone knew he was the guy to get. Yeah. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I can't miss out. And we had Quiksilver is then a bigger company by then. We had we'd gone public. We had more money to kind of go after an athlete. And I was like, it's like Texas Hold'em. I'm like, I'm all in on this thing. Yeah. And Michael Thompson wanted him. Gotcha. Everybody wanted Kelly. And Kelly was just so stressed out about it. He was like, he had those shorts that said, I don't care or whatever. So
yeah, I remember
it was
that.
on the back of him, something like that. I remember it was in the mag, and it was like super funny because I remember going to like Florida, signing Sean first, putting Sean in an ad, just trying to show Kelly, like, see, we're into your brother too. And Sean was a ripper. So Sean was actually on our team first with Keckley, and put him in the ad, and then I signed Keckley to run our team because he was Kelly's guy. I was just like, I'm going to get all Kelly's entourages. Stevens, we sponsored him longboarding down the line, and then I met Kelly's mom. I went to Cocoa Beach, dude. I went to his high school like dance or graduation. Like I bought like little league tickets from his mom. I flew over there and was just like, I got if I can't have the highest bid money wise, I gotta like show them the love. But I knew it was probably going to be the money too, because it was pro surfing was just booming. And so, I come up, at the last minute. I remember Brian Taylor, he goes, hey, Danny, like your offer's kind of low and these are the other offers coming in. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I got to just go for it and type up this contract. And I typed it up for 3 years, and it was more money than our CEO has made. I just came up with this most highest number I could think of that I thought would outbid Gotcha OP, and it did. And I was like, okay, I'm just going for it. And then I sent it over to Brian Taylor, and he was like, then I remember getting the call, he's with Quiksilver, and I was like, yeah, wow. I was so freaking pumped. I was so stoked because to me, and I had told Kelly, I think when, at one point I go, hey, you're the guy. Like, you got to surf. The only thing, you got to go to Hawaii and you got to surf big waves. And so when you get to Hawaii and you go to pipe, I'm going to call our guys, Mickey, Marvin, all those guys, and they run pipe. They get all the waves, and they'll get you on waves. I'm going to tell them the block for you, get you on waves so you can get, and then you got to, and then he did it, and he won pipe. He did, it was insane. That's when we were doing Slater black and white. But Kelly, and I told him, I said, I think you're the guy. You're going to be like, there's Duke Hanamoku, and on the other bookend in surf, I believe it could be you, Kelly, like Kelly Slater, Duke Hanamoku, Kelly Slater, the two most famous surfers ever. Yeah. For different reasons. Yeah. One bringing in the modern age, the other one being the godfather and the soul of surfing. Yeah. And it was and then McKnight was pissed. And the CEO was pissed I signed Kelly. Everyone was pissed, I thought they were going to fire me. And I was like, well, this is worth it. I'll get fired, but then they're going to see they got the guy and he's going to go out and just destroy. Yeah. And they didn't fire me. And then, then I did Slater black and white with Wooly. We had no budget.
That was quite a film.
Yeah. And so Brian Blake and Freeman, all these guys, we ragtag team, and we're just like, I go, Wooly, we got to make this movie for $25,000. I took it out of this one budget, robbed Peter to pay Paul. Like, no one, it's not in the budget. I'm just going to take the hit. They might fire me for, it's not approved by the accountant or the CFO or whatever. I'm just going for it. Yeah. Just winging it, and we made the movie, and it was insane. It was the biggest selling surf video of its time.
Yes. So Kelly wins his first world title, and you're on hand for that.
So Kelly... So this is a crazy time too, because right at that time I was hanging out with Gary Elkerton a lot, and that guy was so gnarly. And
Gary Kong Elkerton.
I love Kong.
Yeah.
Gary Kong Elkerton. I love that guy. He's so insane power surfer, one of the best power surfers ever. And he and I party hard. We did all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, I'd love to say all the shenanigans that he did and said when I picked up at the airport. I'll leave that up to him, in his documentary. But he was nuts, and with his Billy Idol and Madonna, and we would just listen to loud music, and he was just the most charismatic guy. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's world champion kind of potential. However, during that time with the Kong's Island wrong, if you can't rock and roll, don't fucking, Bruce Raymond thing. He was living that part, he was the Aussie new Michael Peterson, Wayne, legend guy carrying Rabbit. He was the new, busting down the door, surf the hardest, win the contest, get the chicks, win the title. He's a rock star. And so, but he wasn't doing that great in the contest. And so he left Quik and he went to OP, because he got, because he saw Curran and the OP was, maybe he felt was more professional or whatever, but it was good, cool. He went with OP. But then we get to Kelly's first final, and when a team rider leaves and then he goes to another thing, it's like this. It was so competitive back there between the brands as well. So Kong goes to OP. They get in the final at Hossegor. It's pumping. It's like double overhead, windy, huge, and everyone's thinking Kong's gonna smoke this kid from Florida. Kelly's like this young teenager from Florida, and Kong's like, this is where he excels in big barrels and big gnarly waves. So Kelly beats him. And there's this weird kind of scenario that went down with paddling now, because there's current, there's no jet skis, dragging guy. So it was this weird deal, but Kelly, all the stars got aligned for Kelly. And then Kelly's like, hey, you need to stand on the beach with my duplicate board that I'm riding out there. It was like a 6'5" Almeric. Remember when you had those black stripes going down the middle?
Yep.
So with the graphite, that with the big Quiksilver logo on the nose. So it was that board. And I'm carrying it on the beach just going, I'm like, bro, it's huge out there. I'm like a company guy. I don't surf that much. I mean, I surf, but I'm not ready to paddle out there and give you your board and swim in. It's huge and gnarly. And he goes, no, man. If my board breaks, I'll swim, and you just need to hold it close to the beach and then hand it to me. Okay, so he beats Kong. It was this crazy, his first win, his first ASP. He'd won Trussell, that was PSA.
Yes, exactly.
When we did the Slater Black and White. So this was his first World Tour win, which he eventually went on to win the title, right? As the youngest ever.
Yes, first year on tour,
So then that night, I think it was Harry Hodges' wedding party or some party at his house for the company, and me and McKnight were there, and Kelly's party was down at Rock Food, I think, down at Hossegor, but it's it's from Biarritz. It's out, it's a bit of a drive. So I told Bob, I said, hey man, I need to go. I know we're at Harry's party, whatever, but I need to see Kelly. He's my guy, man. I got to go high five him, and he's having his celebration party for his first one. It was a big deal. So we do the party. We're dressed up in these nicer clothes at the Quiksilver, corporate Harry Hodge thing. So I drive down to with Bob down to in the rent-a-car. Get there late. Everyone's just they're just champagne's flying, beers. Get into the bar. I see Shane Dorian, Ross Willens, all Kelly's homies. They were new young guns.
Yeah, momentum generation.
Yep. They're all in the bar, just wait there, we're the next. They're just screaming, high fiving, just squirting beer. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I come in the bar, and I see Kelly, and he comes flying over, big white smile. He's like, yeah, Dick. Yeah. He's high-fiving me, all stoked. We're just fist pumping. He comes running up to me, grabs my head, and he freaking headbutts me. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me, dude? He headbutts me, and he slices my head, and it's bleeding.
And it was a love headbutt?
It was like a love headbutt. And I'm just going, bro. And I didn't know whether to be stoked or pissed. I was kind of pissed. I was stoked, but then when he hit me and I felt the blood dripping down on my nice shirt, I was like, dude. I was for that moment, I just wanted to smack him back, but I was but then I just let it go and wiped my head, put cold beer on it, and I was just hugging him
wow.
And he's all sweaty and gross, but it was killer.
High testosterone levels.
It was such high testosterone. Those guys were so jacked up, but to be there for that moment,
yeah.
And then I said, hey, I got your board. What do you want me to do with that? And he gave me that board, and I ended up getting one of my best shots ever in Surfer Magazine.
Oh, wow.
A spread with that board.
Oh, incredible.
And a helmet Tommy Carroll gave me.
When you think back on it all, what's most vivid in your memory? What are like, I want to say the high moments, but maybe not even the moments. When you kind of make sense of it now, right? When you think back at that whole period and being so spearheading of a lot of this stuff that happened, that's like big stuff in surf culture.
Well, yeah, like one thing I wanted to mention was too, like when we started Roxy,
Yeah.
and it was like, McKnight's like, hey, dude, you're going to run the Roxy. It was a bikini company line at first, and then it turned to clothing, but it's like, that's your jam, You've been telling us we need to do girls' clothes. I'm running the men's side. You're going to deal with the women's side. So come up with we're going to have a naming thing, come up with a name, Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to give up names, but you're a name guy, so come up with a name too. Bring it to the meeting. I was like, okay. So at that period of time, I think as I recall, I was going up to the Roxy Theater a lot, partying, going to see like the Chili Peppers, Guns N' Roses. These was all like underground bands. They were just like nobodies.
Sure.
And you could go see them, and there would be like, not that many people there, just raging bar drinking, like the whole thing. And I remember, I think it was No Doubt. Remember Gwen Stefani, like that. I think it was that band. I remember watching that band, and like, but Gwen was like this punker. She was like this gnarly girl that had girl power, but was like, she was like gnarly, but she was a proud feminine, but she was like, don't mess with me. Mm-hmm. And then I remember just looking at the Roxy logo sign out there, thinking rock and roll and the Roxy music and Roxy all, and I was just like, Roxy's a girl's name, like Roxanne, and Roxanne, like Sting, the Police song, and all these things started flying around my head. So when I got back to Quick, and Bob's like, okay, everyone's got their name, Kwock, what's your name? What do you got? And I'm like, Roxy, Roxy, like the Roxy Theater, and I started kind of, and everyone's like, we like Danny's name, like that's the name, let's name it that. So then it became Roxy, and it was crazy because, before that, Lisa Anderson, she was like a kid, teenager, and she came up to me, I'll never forget it, because she's like, man, you guys need to make girls' clothes. This is before Roxy, and I was like, you guys, can you sponsor me? And I'm like, Lisa, like we don't make girls, like we have boys board shorts and whatever, and we give her, but I was like, I don't, like, it was so new, it was so bizarre. But those seeds, like Lisa egging me on, and then me going to Bob saying, hey, we need to make, and then Randy Hild coming on, and all these great people that contributed to the whole Roxy thing. That was crazy. It was a crazy run.
Yep. At what point did you step away, and why did you step away?
I stepped away because I think, I had a time where, I got depressed. I think it was, I was using, I was doing drugs, and I was like a closet, functioning drug addict, I would say. It's kind of like, it's all about fun, and then you take, you're partying and you don't drink, and then, or you don't do drugs, and it's all about fun, but then you have your first drink, or you have your first line, or your first, ecstasy pill, or your first tab of acid, or your first whatever. Thankfully, I never got into opioids or heroin shooting or whatever, that kind of stuff, because those things, I think I probably would have really gotten taken down. But, blow's gnarly. Yeah. But I felt empty. I felt really like lost, shallow. I felt like a douchebag, like I was just turned into that corporate guy that I hated in what I thought was the enemy, and I was becoming the enemy. I was the enemy, and I'm just going, if I want to be real and honest, and I'm doing drugs, and my family's just, I'm not even a good dad. I'm like workaholic. I'm always somewhere doing something crazy, work stuff, partying. I've just been doing that for, decades, it seemed like, 20 years, since I was like 16, since I got caught stealing the shorts, that's that roller coaster ride. And it never stopped. It was just, and I loved it, and it was fun. But then it started getting to where it's like, it just started feeling like it was just all about the money, all about, having like these forms of like tactics and strategies and, like stock option, all business stuff, but it just didn't, and I think it just wasn't fun. I just started losing the stoke, and the fun part went away. And during that time, I think the things that I did, I always, no matter what I did it because I wanted to. I was a fan of all surfers. I love surfers. Yeah, the guys, the girls, I love them all. Like I just love, it's like when Geffen would tell me how much he loved the music, and that's why he was good at it. He's a fan, he's a groupie of all the surfers. I was a groupie of all our team riders. The Malloys, all Jack Johnson, all those guys that I sponsored. I loved all of them. Everything they did, I was the biggest fan of theirs. I just wanted to see them succeed. Machado, all the Beshin, Boothie, all the crew, you know. You, Jamie, every Tim Smalley. I don't name random people that, you know, people don't even know that there's thousands of them that I sponsored. Snowboarders, skateboarders, whatever, motocross riders, you know, windsurfers, Robbie Nash. I mean, there's so many people.
Yeah.
And then VIPs that just wore our stuff. Yeah. So, you know, but mainly the surfers. I was such a fan of it and a fan of them and so stoked on all of them and seeing them succeed that, but when I started getting hazy and the drugs and the burnout and the, you know, and then getting married and then feeling like a crappy dad and, you know, and just, you know, and yet I'm making more money than ever, right?
Yeah.
Like, but the paychecks are insane. Yeah. And I'm going, well, why am I not happy? You know, and I just, you know, and then when I helped Richard Wolcott out, who I mentored as he was a young kid, he broke his neck, and then, you know, I invested in angel investor into Volcom, and he did that, and it went Richter, and, you know, I happened to just be, you know, Richard and I were partners, and it was just this windfall, you know, and then even at Quiksilver, my stock options were through the roof at that time, and but it wasn't about money or anything. I just was burnt out. I was tired, and then when, you know, the windfall happened with Volcom, I was just like, okay, I can step away. You know, I've got the finances to step away. You know, I never thought of like, oh, I'm going to make this kind of money ever in my life. I never thought of it. I just wanted enough to have like a VW van, a little rental property by the beach so I can go surf, you know, like some food, the basics, you know, some shorts, and like I would live in a tree house. I didn't even care. But then all of a sudden, all this stuff comes my way, and I'm just like, I'm not happy, you know. And so I spiraled, left it all, just bailed, sold all my stock, you know.
It's so amazing to hear you say that, because I think so many people are aiming and reaching for what you had
and I get
and
it.
have. But I think it's so fascinating, and it's to have achieved that, to have what everyone thinks they want, and to go, that's not it. What became it? What was where did you find yourself? How did you find yourself?
It was, you know, everything came back to like looking for a father. It came to balance in surfing. So I was out of balance.
Yeah.
I went from nothing to skyrocket ship, crazy rocket ride, money, success, fight, you know, just all that crazy world. Yeah. But and it's so, I almost get like, you know, I've done so much therapy, and it's hard to even talk about it, but it's like, you know, that time when Duke put his hand on my head, it was like trying to have a father. Yeah. And then, you know, the Jeff McCoys, the Alan Greens, the Bruce Raymonds, the Bob McKnights, all the people that were father figures, you know, Lance Collins, even Al Merrick. I'd watch him as I was a team rider in my 30s, and watching him and his wife and Brick and all those guys at Al Merrick when I'd go up there and get my Channel Irons, and seeing that they were Christians, you know. And then as life went on, I kind of like, again, looking for the Father. And I think the Father that I found was, you know, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, you know, and that was the Father. And when I got to that humility and the searching for my humility and letting go the pride and the ego and finding the humbleness. And every day I wake up, man, I put on my beads and all my stuff, and I pray like, hey, do things with love, you know, and just do your best, and you know, be grateful for all the good moments and the bad moments. Try to be as graceful as you can, just like surfing. Yeah. It's like Jerry at Pipe, you know. It's like, dude, when he was eating crap, dude, but then when, you know, he just somehow even fell gracefully, you know. But then when he was in the tube getting barreled, man, he was just grateful. You could tell he was just like, you know, wiping the, you know, the beads of water off it, doing the nose blow tweak. That was such a good move, Jerry. Oh man, Jerry's the man. But yeah, so you've talked all about it, Jamie. You've really, I mean, and for me, watching you as a young man and seeing you do these, I mean, I was so nervous to come on this, you know, because it's hard, you know. That's why I got a little emotional earlier, because it brings back so many feelings, right? Yeah. And they're hard at my age now. Yeah. You become like this Hallmark card. You just, you know, you cry at McDonald's commercial. You know, you just get like really, intro your self-awareness if you are open and curious and open to it and willing to let that come in and be vulnerable.
Yes.
It's a beautiful thing where I was raised where, no, you don't do that.
No, I know.
You're a macho man that, quit your crying.
Yep. No, I think I'm so glad you did agree to talk.
And you know what? You're bringing, like, you doing what you're doing with the journal and the storytelling and the way you connect, Jamie. I mean, when you were a kid and I signed you, I knew you were a star. I knew you had that it thing. And then to see you do your literate thing and go on your writing career, I notice, I'm a fan.
Your heart's there.
It's there.
I feel it.
You're the guy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm stoked to even be, I'm so humbled, I'm chirping. Much gratitude, Jamie.
Yeah. Thank you, Danny.
All right. Aloha. God bless.
Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal and is produced by me, Jamie Brissick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Our theme song is Give Me a Wave by Oscar Matsumiya and Paz Lenchantin. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Costa Sunglasses, FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. The journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.